So I'm going to run through really quickly what I did the other day in class for getting .NET set up on, I'm going to do it on the Windows environment, and then pulling down the software that we were looking at, building it and testing it, and then setting up Visual Studio so you can browse around and play with the software. I'm just going to do this on Windows. The commands that I'm going to type are the same on Mac or Windows, doesn't matter which, but I'm just going to do the setup on Windows. If you have a Mac and you're having trouble with it, you can come see me in office hours, schedule an appointment, and I can work with you on it. You can also talk to the TAs. In fact, you should talk to the TAs before you come see me. But if they can't help you out, then I can come see you. Or you can just do it in Windows and kind of follow along. For the duration of the class, when I do software examples, I am going to do them on Windows just because it seems that the bulk of the students in the class are on that platform. So you can certainly do everything in this class on Mac, but you won't have in-class support. You'll have to come see me in office hours. So what I've got here is I've got a clean Windows 10 environment. It's fully patched, upgraded, all that good stuff. So I think they call that the anniversary update. Latest and greatest Windows 10, nothing else installed, and then I've got a bundle of .NET tools for Windows. I've posted this bundle on Blackboard, so you can go ahead and download it. That's what all this stuff here is. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to get .NET set up. So .NET is going to be our compiler, our runtime environment, and some other developer tools that we're going to use primarily to interact with PinNotes, because PinNotes is a .NET app. So I'm going to install the .NET SDK, which is this one right here. Double click on it. Awesome, I'll agree, click install, yes. And it's going to go ahead and install. This may take longer than this install may take longer than some of the other installs. We'll just sit here and hang out. I'll probably edit the video to make this go way faster than it goes in real life. Okay, so .NET is now installed. So .NET's not like a program that we can just run. It's not in the start menu. It's a software developer kit, so it's an SDK, software development kit. So it's SDK, so we have now some tooling installed on our machine that we can use to interact with .NET, the .NET environment. So let's check out .NET and make sure that it's installed right. So what we're going to do is we're going to run PowerShell. If you're not comfortable with a Windows shell environment, I would get comfortable with it because we're going to spend some time in it this semester. So we can find that by going to the Start menu and just typing PowerShell, P-O-W-E-L. So Windows PowerShell. Boom. So I run that, and let's see if .NET's configured by typing D-O-T-N-E-T. Hey, so .NET is now installed. Great, I can use .NET. So we're going to exit out of this. So we're all done with that. So now the next thing I want to do is I need GitHub. So I need Git. GitHub is a online version of a Git instance. So I'm going to install GitHub Desktop, which is this one right down here. Install that. Okay, so we have the Git client installed now as well. It's going to ask if I want to install these other tools, and I say yes, I do. So we're going to run that. So that gives us Git shell. So now what we have is we have a Git environment on Windows. That's a source control or source code management system, SCM. So we'll explain what that is later on, but it's going to be what we use to manage changes to source code that we're going to make, and allows us to share and generally collaborate on source code. All kinds of things, pull requests that we'll learn about throughout the semester as we talk about tooling. So I went ahead and I ran Git. So I'm going to just go ahead and log on with my GitHub account. So log in. Great, set that up. No local repositories, that's fine, we're going to skip that. Okay, so I have GitHub Desktop, so I can now clone repositories and interact with GitHub. But this is not where we're going to be. We're going to work out of the command line for right now. So what I want to do is I want to run Git shell, put an icon for me here on my desktop. If not, there's one in your Start menu. Git, or run Git shell. So Git shell, say yes, I want to run that, is going to be the command line environment for interacting with Git. So in addition to being able to interact with Git, so I type Git, okay, Git works, I can also interact with .NET from here. There's .NET. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and clone a repository, which is PinNotes, and we want to restore dependencies and compile that and interact with it. So we're going to go to a browser. Yes, that's going to be Edge for me on this clean install. We're going to go to GitHub. Don't care about all this. Great, wonderful. github.com/icotting. So this is my GitHub profile. We're going to go to repositories, and we want to check out pin notes. So pin notes is the application that we're going to work with. So I'm just going to copy this URL and come back to the Git shell. I'm going to type git space clone, and then I'm going to paste that URL into the shell. So I've got git, that's what I'm going to run the program. The command I want is clone, so I'm going to clone this repository. The repository is this repository here, https://github.com/icotting/pinnotes. So hit enter, and it's going to clone pin notes, which means it's going to bring the entire repository to my machine. Again, there's some nuance there that we'll talk about a little bit more throughout the semester, but now I have pin notes. So I can type ls, which is going to list the files in the current directory, and I'm in pin notes. So now what I want to do is we're going to work, well, let's go into pin notes. So cd is the command, change directory, and I can type capital P and just hit tab. Tab file completion, totally awesome. You guys should use it all the time. No need to type out pin notes, just hit P and tab and it will complete it for you. Enter. So now I'm in my repository. As you can see, I'm in the master branch. We'll talk about that throughout the semester as well. So let's see what's in here. Type ls. I've got 3 directories, Android, iOS, and server. We're going to ignore iOS and Android for now. We're going to focus on server. So I type cd space capital S tab to get into server. I'm going to clear with cls. So I'm going to list the directory. And here I have source code, test, and this global JSON file. Again, we're not going to worry about that. So from this directory, so from your user directory, wherever GitHub is, pin notes server, I have the ability to now restore my dependencies. So I can't actually do anything with this. I can't even compile it until I've restored all the dependencies. So this software that I'm writing depends on a number of other software packages. And we're going to manage those softwares using a package manager for dependency management. So instead of having to distribute all the source code with all of its dependencies, which are binary and can be rather large, we're going to just distribute source code and then have files, configuration files that we'll talk about later, that indicate where those dependencies come from. So in order to restore those dependencies, in order to bring all of those dependencies down to my machine, I'm going to use a .NET command called restore. So I type .net restore. That's it. I'm going to hit enter. And what this is going to do is it's going to restore all the dependencies for all of the different packages that I need for my software. So I hit enter, and it starts doing that. This is going to take a little while, first time, because it's going to have to pull quite a number of dependencies. So some of the .NET Core stuff, Entity Framework, ASP.NET Core, ASP.NET Identity, all sorts of stuff that will make more sense as we move through the semester. The nice thing is that when you do this on the in the shell on the command line, we're not going to have to worry about it later on when we open this up in Visual Studio. Nice thing about Visual Studio is it would have automatically done this for me when I first opened up the project. I wouldn't have had to type any commands or anything, and we'll see that in a minute. So now we can see this list of dependencies that it's pulling. This is all good stuff because this would be a list of files that I normally would have to include with this in the repo, which would have made that clone take quite a bit longer. So in this case, it doesn't. And you can see a couple of places where it's talking about a project.json. That's going to be the configuration file that indicates where the dependencies come from. Okay, so here we go. The restore is complete. Everything was successful. I'm going to clear the screen with CLS, hit enter. And now what I want to do is I want to run the test cases. So I'm going to do cd_t, hit tab to go into test. So from here I want to go into unit. So cdu, hit tab, hit enter. Now I'm in the unit test directory, ls there. I have one directory here, and it's pin notes, accessors, domain tests. Those are the only tests I have. I want to run those. So I type cd space capital P, hit tab, which, again, tab completes that whole name. That's awesome. You want to do that. So let's look at what I've got here. Let's clear this. Take a look. Okay, so I've got setup, tests, project.json. This is the root of these tests. So if I want to run the tests from here, from this directory, so pin notes, server, test, unit, pin notes, accessory, domain tests, I can run the tests by typing .NET, .NET space test. That's it. What this is going to do is this is going to compile the tests as well as all of the dependencies. So in this case, the things they test, it's going to find the tests and execute them, which it did. So we can look at the summary. We ran 12 tests. We had 0 errors, 0 failures, 0 skipped. Took 1.868 seconds. That's great. Nothing failed. You get to this point, that means you have successfully downloaded and have pin notes ready to go. Test passed, your environment works. That's a good thing. That's where you want to be. So now what we're going to do is, if you don't care about using an IDE, so an environment where you can does a lot of stuff, we'll talk about that as well in terms of tooling for software engineering. If you don't care about an IDE and just want to check this thing out with like a text editor, you can. So I come down here, Documents, GitHub, Pinnotes, Server. So I can start digging around and exploring my source code. Let's look at the accessors, you know, models. I got all kinds of stuff in here. I can just explore this because they're just normal files. I come down here to tests, unit tests. I can look at my actual tests and jump around and explore it like I would any file on my computer. That kind of sucks. You probably don't want to do that. You probably want to use an IDE for this. So an integrated developer development environment. Not great with my acronyms here. It's late on a Monday. Anyway, you want to use an IDE to explore this code. So we're going to do that. We're going to get out of the shell. So all you people who hate the shell and don't want to work with it, now is the time where you're going to be happy. Because what we're going to do is we're going to install a Visual Studio environment. So we're going to use Visual Studio Community Edition because it's free. That's in this install bundle. So let's go ahead and, since I don't have that set up yet, let's run through installing that. So VS Community, blah, blah, blah. Got to run that. It's going to open that. I want to run. It's going to launch the installer. This is going to take a little bit of time. So again, I'm going to speed this up by editing out the actual install in this video. You can go ahead and do the normal setup for this, just default, don't add anything. If you want to tweak the install and set up environment for, like, universal Windows apps, go for it. But for what we're doing in the class, you just need a default installation. All right, so after a long time, you will have Visual Studio installed and ready to go. There'll be a big thing at the bottom of the installer. It says launch. I've gone ahead and clicked that. After you click that, it'll ask you some setup questions. You can sign in with a Microsoft account if you want, but you don't have to. I skipped that step. You have to pick a configuration for your IDE. I think I just chose general settings and said I wanted a dark theme, which you can see here in Visual Studio. But whatever you want to do to set it up is fine. What you'll end up with is this. So Visual Studio is installed. We can go up to Help and then About Visual Studio, make sure we have the right version. So this should be Community Edition 2015, and we want to make sure we have Update 3. So check that, make sure that that's the case, and then we're going to close Visual Studio. If you didn't have Update 3, then you should install this file here, this 2015.3 Visual Studio Update. But I already have Update 3, and Update 3 is what is included in my install bundle, so I don't need to worry about that. If you downloaded the stuff from Blackboard, then you're all good. The last thing that you need to do is you need to install the Visual Studio tooling for .NET Core, which is this file right here. So I'm going to run that. I'm going to agree. And I'm going to install the .NET Core tooling. This is going to give me access to a bunch of the .NET Core stuff, which is what I've written pin notes in. We need access to those tools, libraries, SDKs, that kind of stuff, in order to build and interact with pin notes from Visual Studio. So if you're just going to do this in the command line, like I showed you earlier, then you don't need to install all this. You could use Visual Studio Code or Atom or Sublime Text or whatever editor you want to interact with the code. If you want to use Visual Studio, which is going to have a bunch of value adds that I think are pretty important, then you do want to install this. So we'll hang out and wait for this to finish installing. Okay, through the magic of post-production, we made that go really fast. So now I have the .NET Core tooling for Visual Studios installed. So I can close that. We're all done here. We don't need to install anything. So now what we can do is we can open up our PinNotes server in Visual Studio. So if we jump back over to Documents and GitHub or wherever you happen to clone PinNotes to, PinNotes server, I've got this Visual Studio solution file called PinNotes, and I'm going to run that. That is in the global directory, so let's go ahead and run PinNotes. It'll maybe ask you the first time what you want to open it with. You want to go ahead and open it with the Visual Studio version selector. And it's going to open our project in Visual Studio. And so when it does this, it's also going to pull any of the dependencies that we need. It's going to scan the project, it's going to build it, compile it, and do all of the stuff that typically we would have to do from the command line with the .NET command. It's just going to take care of it for us automatically, which is really fantastic. It's one of the reasons that we want to use an IDE. So you can see down here, it's going to build out and pull some dependencies for my web client, which didn't happen because we weren't doing anything with the web client earlier, or I should say the web app component of this. Not a client, it's not really a client. Didn't do that from the command line because we didn't run Bower and Gulp. This is happening for us automatically in Visual Studio. And don't worry about what Bower and Gulp are at this point because it doesn't matter. So that might take a little bit of time. Doesn't really matter for us. We can start playing around with the solution. So if we go and look at our unit tests and tests, we can just open these up in Visual Studio now. And so I can see this test where I have these bounding boxes. And I can find that test where it says don't eat the donuts. So this test find note. And this is where, for Thursday, you want to be. So you probably do want to use Visual Studio to navigate your project to try to better understand what's happening and why this says don't eat the donuts. And you can do that by looking around in your source folder and looking at the various accessors. Take a look at our contracts. Again, play with this a little bit and figure out what all that means. We can look at the different functions that are provided by this accessor. Generally, just kind of get familiar with this code base. And again, you can do this from another editor. You can do this from Visual Studio Code, from Sublime Text, from Atom. You can do it from the text editor that's built into Windows. I think you're going to have a much better experience with Visual Studio because you can do things like this. Highlight inode accessor, right-click on it, and say Go to Definition. That's going to take me to the definition, which is this contract. Or I could look at this and say, hey, note. What is a note? Well, let me right-click on that and go to the definition. Well, here's a note. It's a class, and it has these properties. These are the kind of value-added things that you can do with an IDE that you can't do in just any old editor. Some editors do provide some of that functionality. Visual Studio Code, for example, properly set up, will let you jump around the way that I just did in the regular Visual Studio community. And if you're on Mac, you can't run Visual Studio. You would have to run Visual Studio Code. So if you're not going to do this in Visual Studio, I would highly recommend doing it in Visual Studio Code, but you don't have to. You can do it in any editor you want. So that, I guess let's run some tests real quick from here so we can see this work. So when you open it in Visual Studio, it compiles it, does all that good stuff. If you go up here to Test, you go to Windows and the Test Explorer, so click on that. And that's going to show you your Test Explorer, which is this little window right over here. And it looks like it's scanning for tests, and it is. So it automatically finds all of the tests in this project. And I can just click Run All. And what it's going to do is it's going to run all of my tests. So what we did before with the .NET test command, I can do just inside of the IDE by clicking a button. And what we would expect, because we already saw this happen in the command line, we see all those tests pass, which is a good thing. So I'm going to get rid of that window. Back to my IDE. So that is basically the setup that you need on Windows to get pin notes pulled, and so you can start working with it. Remember, for Thursday, I'm going to give you guys a quiz. It'll be a 1-point bonus quiz, so you don't need to freak out about it. But bonus point is nice, and I don't give any bonus points other than this, so good thing for you to get. What you want to do is start to better understand, not from a detailed code level, but from a project structure, what this software is, and be able to answer the question, why does this test say don't eat the donuts? You should be able to figure that out just from looking at the code. If you're worried right now that you don't understand anything that's going on with this software stuff, that is okay. Remember, we're approaching software engineering top-down, not bottom-up. So we're starting really big picture. When you start with the big picture, there's a lot going on that you're not going to understand, and that's all right. What we're going to do is throughout the semester, we're going to drill down and get a little bit deeper so you can start understanding the different parts of, in this case, this specific software, and more broadly speaking, software in general. So if you're a little lost right now, that's cool. Don't worry about that. I would expect that most of the class is a little lost at this point. If you've gotten to the point where you can open this in Visual Studio and run the tests, or you can interact with this from the command line and run the tests all pass, then you're where you need to be for where we are in class right now, and you don't need to worry. If you're not able to do that, then you probably should start getting a little bit worried and should talk to the TAs or talk to me. So that's the video. Hopefully this helps you guys get everything set up and running, and we can pick this thing back up later on this week.